Hey there, winners. Welcome back to the Winning Play Podcast. I'm Drew James, here with co-host Kendall Cass, producer Rob Huter. We are ready to bring you all a talk about what we just saw in week 2 of the NFL season and get you ready for week 3 fantasy betting tips, NFL talk. Guys, welcome back. We've got Kendall off the DL, fresh from COVID. We were having to use streamers to fill in for the flex the last couple weeks, but how are we feeling now?
It's kind of fitting. I was, out of commission for a little bit. And from the looks of the NFL weekend, this past weekend, there's a lot of players that are out of commission now I feel like teams are just getting decimated 2 weeks into the season. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'll start with my depressing weekend. My Dolphins obviously lost Tua, which has our whole season up in the air. Hurts all the fantasy guys' values on the Dolphins. And then once we got into the weekend, it got worse. In our league of record, for instance, let me run down some of my picks. Round 2, Isaiah Pacheco on IR now. Round 3, Jalen Waddle, vastly decreased because Tua's out. Round 4, Cooper Kupp going to the IR. Mark Andrews not really performing. Keep going down. Hollywood Brown out for the season. Round 13, Justin Herbert. Now he's hurt. Still waiting to hear more on that. But my entire team has been decimated, as well as my actual Dolphins, where usually once the Dolphins start to suck is when I can just lean into fantasy. And now I'm just depressed everywhere and getting ready for the basketball season. I will say a couple guys that are my saving graces right now are Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I got pretty late in the draft, or Rashid Shaheed, who I got in round 10. So there's some saving grace out there, but I feel like everyone has been hit with injuries of some kind so far in fantasy this year.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's funny because most years, whenever you're drafting, that year after year, the odds on injury to the running back position is significantly more precarious, whereas receivers tend to be more reliable. And whether it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, I'm forgetting there's a couple others too, right? Like, guys are just dropping like flies.
Keenan Allen.
Well, and you got to question whether or not you got to question whether or not the limitations on off-season practices, types of practices, limitations on preseason games, whether or not that has an effect, because not only are we seeing a drop in offensive touchdowns, but the last 2 years, last year was the year of the quarterback injury, and this year we're seeing just as many stars go down in week 2 as we've seen in other years. So I wonder if there's any correlation there.
I'd say, you could blame Sean McVay, because I feel like McVay and the Rams a few years ago, they were at the forefront of we're not playing anyone in the preseason. No one's really going to do a whole lot of camp. And a lot of teams started emulating that because they saw the success. They were healthy that year. They won the Super Bowl. And I think I saw the stat. There was 105 touchdown passes 2 years ago, the first 2 weeks. Last year there was 86. This year there's 67 or something like that.
I think the lowest it's been in at least 10 years.
There is some direct correlation.
It's a precipitous drop for sure. The other one being that more than ever we're throwing the rookie QBs, second-year QBs in, and there's on top of the limited practice reps, then it's also the young QBs with limited practice reps. So it's there's a lot going on there. It's very interesting for sure.
As much as you want to blame Shanahan, I would the guy who I'm blaming not for the injuries but for such a decrease in offense is Vic Fangio. His defensive scheme with the 2 extremely high safeties has kind of taken over the NFL. I think everybody's really trying to limit the Shanahan offense. And so we're now seeing the chess move, the counter move to, hey, this motion offense and stuff has taken over the league and is starting to put up numbers. And now we're seeing the defenses have adjusted and are forcing way more stuff underneath. And I think you're seeing a lot of NFL teams now on offense say, okay, well, then we're going to run the ball.
I'm sorry, did you just give the Tampa 2 cover shell credit to Vic Fangio?
I don't think he runs an actual Tampa 2 shell, but his 2 high safeties in cover 3, cover 4 is becoming a lot more popular. But it is based in the Tampa 2. But it was 4 or 5 years ago where Vic Fangio started doing it, and then everyone is copying it now.
Completely, yeah.
At this point, I'd say injuries is probably the biggest story in the NFL. And maybe the next biggest is the Saints. I don't think anyone saw this coming. Alvin Kamara looks like he's 24 years old again. Dude is just dropping bombs on people. Derek Carr is playing as well as he ever has. Clint Kubiak has transformed that offense. They went from 20th in motion offense last year to the most pre-snap motion in the league thus far through 2 weeks. And that is creating opportunities all across the field for guys like you talked about Rashid Shaheed. I mean, he was one that I was really high on fantasy-wise coming into this season, particularly because I thought his target share would go up and the offense was changing. But even I didn't expect this type of boom this quickly. And even Derek Carr, you can argue with all the injuries to Jordan Love and others, like Derek Carr should probably be rostered and started in a number of leagues at this point, especially with his schedule coming up too. It's like, man, this Saints team, they were predicted to probably finish third behind either Atlanta, Tampa, or Tampa, Atlanta by just about everyone. And they look like the best team in the league, bar none, through 2 weeks.
Pretty much. Another stat that is interesting about that Chiefs offense, last year on their dropbacks, they used play action 16% of the time. And so far this year, they're using play action 43% of the time. Last year, that was the least amount of play action in the entire NFL. This year, they're first. And that has seemed to open things. I mean, the Cowboys hadn't lost a regular season home game in like 2 years and got destroyed in front of their own fans, which I know all of us non-Cowboy fans kind of like to see. Alvin Kamara on the Saints, though, I think he's a league winner this year. I was looking back. Since 2004, Alvin Kamara has 15 games where he has led all running backs in fantasy points. It's by far the most in the NFL. Second is LaDainian Tomlinson. And then Arian Foster, and then McCaffrey. I mean, this guy has, whenever he's been healthy and that team is anything close to competitive, he's always been a top 1 or 2 or 3 running back since the year no one drafted him and he came out of nowhere to lead the league.
Well, it's interesting too because his usage still leads to production regardless of team circumstance. So last year I had him and he was getting great production in fantasy just because the team offense actually really stunk. So he was getting a lot of dump off passes and things like that. And now we see that they're putting up points and he's still getting it. So it's really interesting to see that. Now he did fall off at the end of last year. And I do kind of want to see where, regardless of if this Saints offense is for real, there is a level of coming back down to earth that they will have. I mean, they've scored on every possession they have. And
they're not going to drop 50 every week.
So it'll be interesting to see how that works. I agree with the Rashid Shaheed picks and the Kamara moving forward. If a league winner is someone you get a little bit later and they end up bringing this type of value, I mean, I absolutely think that he could be one of those guys.
I'd say another big story.
League of record. I think I got Kamara in the 5th. I got Kamara and then Montgomery as my RB1 and RB2 in the 5th and 6th rounds and loaded up on stud receivers. And I dropped 180 with 6 points for my quarterback this week. So things are looking pretty good in that league.
Well, another big storyline in addition to the Saints and the injuries, how about the rookies who came to play this week? A lot of guys we were worried about after week 1. Some people were panicking after week 1. Rob and I talked about don't panic. I still panic anyways. But guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Bowers, these guys came to play. Is that for real? Are these guys going to stick around, or is this kind of a one-hit wonder?
I think, everyone drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. expecting him to produce at an elite level. And week 1 was more, it's his first game. He needs to get on the same page with Kyler. That Arizona offense looks like it's going to be pretty solid as long as Kyler stays healthy. They stay ahead of the change because James Conner is, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago, one of the most underrated running backs in the league. So he's not going anywhere. And sheer volume alone is going to keep Malik Neighbors. What did he have? 18 targets. I think his target share was like 55% or something crazy in week 2. Now, that's not sustainable, but knowing the lack of options around him, I'm sure he should be solid the rest of the year as well. But Brock Bowers, I'm glad you brought him up because he was one I wasn't high on. I didn't expect that offense to be very good. And I thought, being a rookie tight end, how much value can he really bring? And when you look at the tight end landscape right now, and so many of the guys that were drafted ahead of him, he's by far the most productive tight end in fantasy football in the NFL right now.
Yeah, he's making a case that he could easily be tight end 1 on the year. I mean, because I don't see this as like, oh, just this week they needed him. I mean, he's easily the second option behind Devontae, and I mean, it's looking good so far. The Neighbors thing, Harrison Jr. I think is in the most consistent situation for the rookie wide receivers. Neighbors, Brian Thomas, not so much because the Jaguars are falling. Neighbors, I loved his talent. I actually picked him as having a higher ceiling than Harrison Jr. But I just think his situation, regardless of these absurd target numbers, will lead to a little bit more volatility moving forward. I think Harrison's going to have some more consistency. Neighbors is in a less positive situation, but I mean, I love his talent. So I mean, on games that he gets fed, look out, And then Bowers, we're talking about as tight end 1 potentially throughout the year.
At the very least, he's a must start now going forward, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, I mean, I think he's in second place of all tight ends. He's 0.1 points behind Isaiah Likely, but Isaiah Likely, we'll get to him in our faller segment, didn't do anything week 2. He had a huge week 1. But while we're at it, let's talk risers and fallers this week in fantasy football. We talked about Rashid Shaheed. If he's not rostered, get him. Trade for him now. Who are your other risers this week? Who are the big guys that we got to have?
Well, I know you, Rob. I know one of your hometown boys is someone that you're really happy with.
Oh, man, I'm excited. And I love this guy. His name is Rod Christopher Godwin. I wish he went with Rod so we could call him the Rod God, but
how do you miss Rod God as the greatest nickname in football?
It's amazing. I don't know why he ran away from it, but Christopher Godwin, man, this guy, I know he had an injury, a pretty significant one 2 years ago, and he had one of those injuries where even when you're healthy and playing, it takes you half the season to get back your explosion and to look like you previously did. But this is a guy that gets constantly overlooked like the rest of my Bucks team in general does. He gets constantly overlooked. He's had 3 top 10 finishes in a points per game basis, 2 more What actually has happened is the best third down converter wide receiver in the league. Going back to last year, he has over 35 conversions on third down. This is the guy that, at least in the first 2 weeks, and honestly, I don't see it changing moving forward. He's the guy that Baker in this offense hangs on to convert these necessary third downs and later on, like, biggest game-clinching moments. So he's a guy I love, and
I'm curious. There is no one more plugged into the Bucks of anyone that I know than you. And in PPR leagues, at this point, he's outproducing Mike Evans. Do you think that is sustainable, or do you think that'll kind of level itself out?
Yeah, who are you taking the rest of the year? Do you want Chris Godwin or Mike Evans on your fantasy team?
It just totally depends on your roster construction, right? Like, I would rather have Chris Godwin as my wide receiver 2 on a team instead of having Mike Evans as a wide receiver 1. So it has to do with consistency. The floor of Godwin's going to be higher because he is the PPR guy and the third down guy, but Mike is going to have week winning games. He's going to have like 150-yard, 3-touchdown performances and stuff. That will come.
And then he's going to run into Marshawn Lattimore 2 times and have 3 catches for 16 yards, as he does every year.
Yeah, so I mean, it is going to be like that, but I would not take this week 2 performance and be super concerned about Mike Evans. But again, it comes down to roster construction, right? Like, I have Godwin as a wide receiver 2 behind CeeDee Lamb in one of our leagues, our league of record, and I'm extremely happy. I'm not going to move him. I don't see the value in trading him for that unless it's like an absurd number or absurd package of players or things like that, but I love him moving forward. I do think that Mike will end up with more points by the end of the season. I think that people need to slow their roll on that. I mean, right now Godwin is the wide receiver 1. That doesn't last, but I love him moving forward for consistency. But again, in fantasy, sometimes you are looking for the boom or bust because that is, at the end of the day, you're looking for a ceiling play in fantasy rather than trying not to lose. So,
right, well,
I do.
Oh, sorry. No, finish.
What's up? No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say we've talked about some guys like Shaheed, like Chris Godwin, which I didn't know. Rod God. Never heard it. I love it. Yeah, it's a shame that he
It's
missed
Because
awesome.
he
that.
changed his name. Yeah. How do you move? Yeah.
What about some fallers? Like, there's a number of guys that were drafted in the
Well,
middle
real quick,
rounds. Who are counting.
I got one more riser at least that I want to talk about.
Oh,
J.K.
okay.
Dobbins on the Chargers. J.K. Dobbins is currently leading the NFL in missed tackles forced. He's not even getting 50% of the carry share in San Diego and has still been putting up ridiculous numbers. I know we were all worried about how he was coming back from injury. I don't know. Did you guys see his front flip in the end zone? He's looking pretty healthy. Uh, is it time to be all in on Dobbins, or do we expect him to tear another knee next week and we'll all look stupid for saying it?
I mean, until he doesn't tear something midway through a season, I'm going to guess, especially knowing the type of offense that they are running in Los Angeles under Jim Harbaugh. He's a physical runner in a system that is going to be putting him in situations where he's going to be taking a lot of hits. So I would tread with caution. I mean, he's balling out. Picked up another 130 some odd yards
Gus
in week
Edwards
2.
got 18 carries in the game this week.
Well, they can sustain that because when you're on a team that runs the ball 65% of the time,
they ran it 44 times.
Look at who they played the first 2 weeks. They played the Raiders and they played the Panthers. 2 teams that they're able to run the football against, get ahead, and keep running.
And not worry about
what's going to happen when they aren't running the ball quite as well and they actually have to throw the ball? You got to think that some of that volume might come back in, and also knowing the injury factor to both those guys, but primarily Dobbins, I'm not there yet ready to jump completely on that train.
And neither am I. The way I put it in fantasy is if I have J.K. Dobbins on my fantasy team, I got him late and I'm very happy. If I don't have J.K. Dobbins, I'm not that upset because call me a hater, I still don't believe the season-long product, right? So that's just how I would
say
put
this. I get the injury concerns that's going to be there. That aside, looking at his schedule, they don't have a ton of games on that schedule where I expect them to beat. Now, they do have the Cardinals coming up and the Saints and the Chiefs. Those are games. But when you going through the schedule, they're playing a lot of teams that aren't great. And then you get to the fantasy playoffs where they'll be playing the Buccaneers, the Broncos, and the Patriots the last 3 weeks of the season. Those are 3 teams where you get to the playoffs. Those might all be that game script you talked about, Kendall, where they can just pound the ball. So looking ahead of the...
Well, yeah, but that's assuming he's there in week 15.
Exactly. You are, but we're disregarding the injury concerns. The schedule actually breaks down where at the end of the season, Dobbins, if he is healthy, he might be the running back you want to have to take your team to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's certainly the possibility.
Let's go on then. Who is falling in fantasy? Maybe not guys we have to drop right now, but who should you be panicking about if you put too much draft capital into?
Well, I think I'm going to eat some crow here. I was high on Zamir White coming into the season. I liked him. I didn't expect him to blow up, but I thought he was going to be a consistent RB2 and get fed plenty of volume, catch some passes out of the backfield. And thus far, that has just not come to fruition whatsoever. He is doing a really poor job. I think he fumbled again recently. And they seem to be able to move the ball through the air much better than I thought they were going to as well, especially with the emergence of Brock Bowers. I did talk about in the preseason, people were hating on Devontae Adams far too much. Some of the people were commenting on our social post and, he's washed. No, have you watched this guy? Has he ever not put up 1,200 yards ever? Like, until that happens? So like, their offense and their passing game is better than I thought. And so I think I was wrong on that. And Zamir, at this point, he's falling. He can't be started, I don't think, in any league until further notice.
I'll follow your crow with eating some of my own. I went into the season using late round picks on Chase Brown in multiple leagues. I thought that Zach Moss's skill set was replaceable, and I liked his explosivity. It was like an 82 to 18% snap share last week in a game that was competitive, and he had I saw something where he had 0 pass protection snaps. So that's a very concerning number for this isn't a split backfield anymore. This is Zach Moss's backfield. until proven otherwise. So he's definitely a faller for me. I think people thought he would be a sleeper in this split backfield, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. Another split backfield that I'd be worried about is if you've got Zeke Elliott on the Cowboys. I mean, I know the game script was not great for them running the ball this week, being down by 30 almost immediately, but Rico Dowdle outcarried him and looks way better than Zeke. I know they fed Zeke week one. There, is that a loyalty thing of them bringing him back? Let's feed him. But I bet higher on Rico Dowdle now than I would Zeke going for the rest of the season. I think Zeke, 6 carries for 15 yards this week. Not what you're, and maybe the Cowboys aren't going to play the juggernaut that is the Saints every week, but you've got to be worried that old man Zeke is not going to be putting up his week one numbers for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
To round up this running back fallers thing that we're doing right now, I just want to talk about DeAndre Swift for a hot second because he looks terrible, and because
that
of how bad he looks,
line looks terrible.
That's what I'm going to is because he looks terrible. Then I look at the overall arcing theme for the Bears this year. They went out and got Shane Waldron, the power run part of the Sean McVay tree. He's not a pass-heavy offense. And so it's really weird that they went out and got all these receivers. They didn't draft an O-lineman in this draft like some people wanted them to in the first round. And then they got DeAndre Swift, who's a pass-catching back at his best. But they have Shane Waldron, a run-heavy power run scheme coordinator. And I think we're seeing the results of this dysfunction right here when the strength of your offense isn't the offensive line and the strength of your running back room isn't power run schemes either. So it's an interesting DeAndre Swift. I'd be very worried as an owner moving forward. I don't think that's an anomaly. I think it's going to be a rough season. Maybe at the end they get it together if they can get a passing identity. But yeah, it seems like just not a great series of fits from coordinator to execution on that team right now.
Yeah, there's a really good chance that there are thousands of 0 RB or anchor RB drafters that drafted DeAndre Swift as their RB2 in the 7th round or so, and we're expecting decent production. And a couple of years ago, I just remember flashes of him with Detroit when he would catch the ball out of the backfield. He looked so elusive, and I'm like, man, and he's not a small guy. So in my mind, I was like, he's gonna put it together. He's gonna put it together. And year after year, we just watch his efficiency running the football behind that Philly offensive line last year. He looked bad. He was just not a good, productive running back. And I think Chicago was also banking on Caleb Williams just coming in and being like serviceable right away. And clearly there's a learning curve there for him as well. And he has not hit the ground running whatsoever. It hasn't helped that a couple of the receivers have already gone down. But yeah, I'm with you. Like DeAndre Swift, you have to be extremely worried. And he's someone that if he was on any of my rosters, which thankfully he isn't, I don't know if you could start him until we see something different.
We do have a couple breaking news items here that have just dropped while we're doing the show. The first one is going to go into this fallers category. The Dolphins have placed Tua Tagovailoa on IR, so he's out at least 4 to 6 weeks. That's got to hurt pretty much every Dolphins player's fantasy.
Yup.
Tyreek Hill drops. I know they signed Tyler Huntley. I don't think he's going to start at least the first couple of weeks. Waddle, I think, drops a lot. Achane is obviously going to get a lot of targets and a lot of rush. I do think Mostert's going to come back and eat some into his share of carries. I mean, this week, Jeff Wilson got hurt in the first quarter, leaving them kind of with just Achane, and Jalen Wright doesn't look ready for primetime yet. But when Mostert comes back, I do think that's going to take – I mean, obviously, you're still starting Achane if you've got him. The Dolphins are still going to get him the ball. But his value goes down less.
You're right. The receivers likely take the biggest hit. And if I had to guess, I was actually watching the guys on CBS talk about this morning, and they were debating who they would rather start today, and they were leaning toward Waddle over Shaheed. To me, that's not even – I would be shocked. I would legit be shocked if Jalen Waddle is startable in 2 weeks, if Skylar Thompson is still your quarterback. And at the very least, since we know he's starting this week in Seattle – I want zero part. I already benched Waddle in the league. I have him. I don't even know what scrub I put in front of him, But I'm sorry, I've watched Skylar Thompson throw a football in the NFL, and
I'm with you on Waddle, especially this week.
And pray.
Well, and Hill can take a screen pass and score you 15 points, and you'll be good. But he goes from, hey, he's going to score 20 every week to he's probably going to score 10 to 17 if he gets a touchdown. And Waddle has gone from the 15 points a week to he's probably going to score 7 or 8 unless he scores a touchdown.
Yeah, I made a keeping it real on these. I made a keeping it real on this Dolphins offense, and yeah, I think Tyreek, they're gonna give him more manufactured touches. He still takes a hit. Waddle is the biggest one to take a hit. I have Devon Achane though, and you know what? I'm really not super nervous. I think he has such a huge piece of this offensive scheme that his touchdown capability and ceiling will take a hit because the offense as a whole will be worse. But I mean, we're talking about in PPR. This guy was just as much a slot receiver as he is a running back,
He's gone from, I think last year he ran a route on like 40% of snaps, and this year it's up to like 57% of snaps he's running routes.
It's wild.
And because of the Vic Fangio defense, and everyone is running the high 2 safeties against the Dolphins because of Tyreek and Waddle, almost all these passes to Achane, he's wide open. He's just sitting there with everybody watching the receivers. I don't think that's going to change. Even if they are coming down a little bit more because of our backup quarterback. He is going to get touches. And some of them are going to be catches. So he's definitely still a start. One other faller who was a big week 1 talking point, Isaiah Likely. I mean, he had, to me, all the signposts of a week 1 overreaction. Playing a team, Kansas City, that always shuts down Mark Andrews and had bracketed Mark Andrews on every single pass. I didn't think that was going to continue where Isaiah Likely was getting every target on the Ravens. Comes back down to earth this week with 4 points. Is he a guy you're keeping rostered? Is he a guy you're starting and hoping that ticks back up? Is it somewhere in the middle? Or is he just to get rid of him and move on?
No, I mean, knowing how atrocious and putrid the tight end position has been thus far, just go down the list. The top 10,
the top scoring tight end in the league.
Laporta has 3 catches this year.
So does Kelsey, I believe.
And Evan Ingram is still banged up. They don't know if he's going to play. Njoku, they don't know if he's going to play. So if you were able to add Likely after week 1, you are not dropping him now. You'd be silly to do that. Can you expect him to do anything what he did close to week 1? No, probably not. But knowing the status of the tight end position in fantasy, he 100% still needs to be rostered.
Yeah, and I think you just need to be realistic about him, right? I mean, we're talking about a guy in a literal split tight end room. So, Mark Andrews isn't going to just completely disappear. They needed him for blocking in week 1. Their offensive line was getting wrecked, and he had the car accident with limited reps. I mean, Isaiah Likely is going to be a lower touch, high efficiency player. He's going to make the big plays and stuff like that. So if you thought that you dumped all this fab to get a 10 target a game guy, I would say you're probably upset, but I also would say that wasn't realistic. If you broke down the actual metrics of week 1. So I think you got him, and you're happy you got him because the tight end landscape's been tough, but you just got to be realistic moving forward.
So I've got one more piece of breaking news. I don't know if you guys have even seen this yet or not. And I know when we'll do our separate waiver wire segment for the internet here, but the Chiefs have just signed Kareem Hunt.
Right.
Oh, they did sign him.
They signed him this morning, I think officially to the practice squad. That kind of makes this backfield a I don't want any of them situation. What are your thoughts? Are you on the same page? Guys like me that had Pacheco as their starting running back and drafted CMC in another league, there's not a ton of running backs to grab out there. Are any of these Chiefs worth spending your fab budget on?
I mean, if you were the one who lost Pacheco, you need to take a stab and hope that one of them gets the job. I think.
Who do you stab?
Maybe you even try to get 2. But don't forget, Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back in week 5 as well. So really, there's going to be 4 guys in a couple weeks. Now, when Pacheco went down, Carson Steele was the guy that they gave the carries to. He had 7 carries for 24 yards, so he wasn't ultra efficient. It was also not the easiest of matchups. And so, I guess if I'm going to go with one right now, because I'm not a believer Hunt coming off the street. I get he knows the system and he's played with the Chiefs before. He knows Andy Reid's system, but he's almost 30 years old. He hasn't played in a while. I have a hard time believing he's just going to have immediate impact right now, week 3. So if I'm going to go after one, I guess I'm going Carson Steele. But to be honest, I'm probably, as someone that isn't in that situation, I'm avoiding him and letting someone else spend their
I will
fab.
say Carson Steele, I think, is definitely a candidate for the coolest name in the NFL.
Oh, he's in an all-name NFL team for sure.
I've got him up
Carson
there already.
Steele is sick.
Dolphins quarterback Storm Duck. I mean, there's a few, but
he's got the long blonde hair. He owns he owns an alligator. I mean, like he's the
I
whole.
saw somebody's fantasy team picture is him riding an alligator with his hair flowing behind. I mean,
that's great.
He's the coolest looking and sounding player. I don't know if that translates to points, but
so if I'm looking at just next week, I'm picking up Carson Steele. But I actually don't want any of these guys long term. And what's weird to me is right now as it stands, I kind of had a feeling that Kareem Hunt would sign if he was in the building. I didn't think they would turn him away. For whatever reason, I think he's lost a step. He's older. He's coming in off the streets. But everywhere he's been, for whatever reason, he seemed to have won the coaches over in the red zone. And they always use him as a dual threat in these red zone packages. And whether he has proven to them that he has a nose in practice or whatever it is, it seems like he always comes out on top. Even when he was splitting with Nick Chubb and stuff, they must really like what he provides in the short area as a pass catcher, blocker, or runner. So I would actually end up, if I didn't need him for next week, because next week I go Carson Steele, but if I needed him for a couple weeks down the line, I'd actually take a shot on Kareem Hunt, as gross as that sounds.
I love it. Well, let's get into actual game talk here. We're going to get to next week's game in a second, but a couple of the key games from this week that we just watched, wanted you guys take on. We already talked about Saints-Cowboys. What about this Chiefs-Bengals game? What do you guys take from that? We've watched the Bengals do pretty well against the Chiefs when Burrow's playing. Game comes down to the wire. Patrick Mahomes gets an interception overturned, or with incompletion overturned on a penalty that would have sealed the game. I saw a stat this week. Patrick Mahomes has 16 interceptions overturned on penalty over the last 2.5 years. Tom Brady had 16 interceptions overturned by penalty his entire career. Chiefs are clearly getting some favorable calls.
Yeah, and you know me, I'm not a Chiefs fan whatsoever. As a diehard Tom Brady fan, I'm concerned that he's climbing that ladder and getting closer. But sometimes you make your own luck. They're situationally sound. That is something that most fans don't recognize or talk about. And it's something that New England for 20 years was the best in the league at. It's being situationally sound. And was that pass interference on that 4th and 16? 100%. He got there way early. That flag should have been thrown 100 times out of 100. And I'm sorry.
I will say a lot of times on those Hail Mary type plays, you don't see that call. It should be called. It was pass interference. But I guess it wasn't
like a bang bang. That was like a bang.
It was like especially flagrant. Yeah, it was especially flagrant.
You have to throw that flag. And
I will say
the interception he threw that got called back was not so clear. Now, it won't be talked about a lot because Patrick Mahomes threw another interception the very next play. But he was bailed out, and then that ridiculous interception by the one-handed pick by the Bengals defender.
Yeah, that was sick.
Which was still on a throw that he shouldn't have made because that guy was covered.
And that game did deliver on its...
a little bit, right? He's a little loose with the ball. At the beginning of last season, the first 5 weeks, I think it was, he led the league in picks or something like he has stints like this. But again, when the game matters, when it's late, they play and they execute and other teams do not. And I don't know if it's because the pressure that those teams feel to have to play perfect late against the Chiefs. Whatever it is, consistently we're seeing teams not execute late when it matters most, and the Chiefs almost always do.
I like that you pulled the tether to the Tom Brady and the situationally sound, although I'd say that those Patriots were more of a machine and cleaner even on those situationally sound, because because it kind of seems like I've been thinking like going back to last year and even now, and then you include the Pacheco injuries and the Hollywood Brown injuries and stuff. To me, yes, they have the best quarterback and they have not made the game-breaking mistakes at the very end. But there is this theme where something is off with this offense. There is something off with this offense. It's not smooth, it's not polished. They have the big play ability, but whether it's
I
Kelsey
think
taking a
Travis
step,
Kelce is starting to look old. Yeah, there's a few factors.
like whether it's Kelsey
He
taking
is
a
getting
step
old.
back, just going back all like this is not just this year, 2 weeks of overreactions, things like that. It's all of last year too. There's something going
And yet
on.
they won
I
the
was
Super Bowl again.
I know, and that's and you know, and you got to give him credit. It goes back to situationally sound. Now this game delivered on its promise of a slugfest. We love to see the Bengals and the Chiefs go at it, but it's just I gotta say, like, not fantasy so much, but just in real life watching them, I'm waiting for them to kind of find a cohesive identity and to find Mahomes play more consistently within the system rather than like the spectacular wow magic that we saw a couple years ago. So it is interesting, to see that. Now there,
One other game from last week I want to look up real quick before we move on to this week's games. Our Monday night game, the Falcons and the Eagles. I mean, we had some interesting stats, but a crazy ending. What are your takeaways from that game? Are the Falcons legit? Are the Eagles just chokers? What's going on there in the NFC?
I mean, I think one of the key takeaways, obviously, and Saquon Barkley, he tried to own it after the game. Hey, I dropped the ball. But I was texting you guys as it was happening, and that 3rd and 3 with a $150 left and no timeouts for Atlanta, you very clearly run the football there because now there's about a minute 10 if you don't get the first down running it, which they had been running it well.
And that's why you brought in Saquon Barkley.
Let's say it's 4th and 1. You could push and the game's over. I mean, there was so many reasons why you obviously run the football there. And even though, yes, he was open in the flat, and if he catches it, he probably gets the first down and then they take a knee and the game's over. But that is still a risk when you put the ball in the air. Guys drop it sometimes. And Barkley open the door for that. And then all the hate that Cousins has taken for years about, him playing at night under the bright lights. And in the last couple of years under the bright lights, he's won a bunch of games. And what he did in that final drive was pretty darn impressive.
I will say
Drake
it gave
London
me
is alive.
Well, it gave me Houston Texans versus my Tampa Bay Bucks last year, where Baker led a drive with under a minute left to score a touchdown, and they went down in like 30 or 40 seconds. A complete defensive breakdown. I mean, look, you got to give credit to Kirk. He made the throws when it didn't look like he was doing it all game and stuff. But man, that was just such an ugly meltdown by the Eagles on the call, 3rd down. I mean, look, he catches it, and then you laud them for taking the risk and getting that first down and sealing it. But I mean, it was just an ugly, ugly loss, and we'll see what Atlanta does with that final drive momentum. Because although they moved the ball on offense, they still looked not there yet as a finished product for 99% of that game. And then that last one, it was just soft zone coverage and open receivers everywhere. And it was just an ugly, ugly loss by the Eagles more than a win. Besides, giving credit to Kirk and that offense for coming up clutch.
Absolutely.
The other, real quick though, I will say, the Bucks-Lions game had a very similar situation. Now, I put it more on Baker because it was an RPO, but he did the exact same thing where we needed to run the clock out. We were actually in our own end zone area, and he decided to pull it and try to get a slant to Mike, and it just got knocked down, and they had a minute left and a timeout when we punted to him. Now, luckily, our defense held where the Eagles didn't, but it was the exact same situation. These coaches, man, like some of these game decisions, I mean, Dan Campbell made some ugly game decisions to end the half and lost them 3 points. So it is an interesting thing to see. And after the Eagles game, they had a meeting, but the meeting was held by all players. Coaches didn't speak. They've labeled themselves as a player-led team. So it is interesting to see Nick Sirianni make this poor choice on the 3rd down. He doesn't even really seem to have ownership over the team in the sense of like their elected leader. So I mean, it is an interesting thing to see moving forward what this does.
I think labeling yourself as a player-led team is a really interesting way of saying they don't like the coach.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that is a really good segue to look forward to this week's games. After watching Philly give it up the way they did on Monday night. And so let's take a look at week 3, and let's start there with the Eagles. They're now having to go on the road against the juggernaut wagon that is the New Orleans Saints all of a sudden.
God, I hate that.
Saints are laying only 1.5. So there's still a lot of belief in Philadelphia despite the collapse. I was kind of surprised when I saw that line open where it did. I'm curious where you guys lean in this one.
I like what New Orleans is doing. I mean, the Philly, I have not been convinced yet as to where they're at. I like the Saints. I'm going to ride the hot team here. I mean, yeah, giving up 1.5, I'll take them with the points there, even on the road.
No, it's in New Orleans.
Oh, it's in New Orleans. Then I'm definitely taking the Saints minus 1.5.
Yeah, Saints have a gritty defense. I spoke early on in some of these earlier weeks. They have one of the most continuity in the league. Philly's secondary, I'm looking at matchups. Philly's secondary is their weakness. I mean, they obviously blew it this last game. Their defensive strength is their run defense, and even if they gave up some yards the other night, it is still their strength. So I'm looking at this. Bad secondary. I think New Orleans got some gritty corners and defense overall. I mean, I'm taking New Orleans in the points.
Yeah, I'm happy to lay 1.5 here. And I would suspect that this line will move quite considerably to 2.5 and maybe even 3 by game time. Because I was really surprised when I saw that. And New Orleans has always been a solid home field advantage. It's never an easy place to play. And there might be some discord in that locker room in Philadelphia after the way they lost that game. And like you said, Rob, the secondary has been an issue, and it wasn't just giving it up to Atlanta at the end of the drive. Week 1 against Green Bay moved the ball pretty well. That was a shootout. Both teams were moving the ball up and down the field all game long. They just happened to have the ball last with time left. Yeah, I know Jordan Love had 80 yards to go with 20 seconds left, but generally speaking, like, they got the ball last and they went and scored and won. Knowing all that, I find it hard to believe any reason you could put any money on Philadelphia going on the road to cover that 1.5 this week. So I'm with you. I'm riding the Saints.
What about here's a big Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead.
So say a big interconference battle coming up this week. You got the Texans at Minnesota. Texans favored by 2.5 on the road. But Minnesota, another surprising 2-0 team. Oh. Is Sam Darnold for real? Should we be betting against them at home, giving up points?
This is a really strange game because I feel like everyone and their mama is going to jump on Houston in this game. And, I said it preseason, I love this team. I think they're going to the AFC Championship. Clearly a believer in Stroud. I hate Ohio State. And when I saw what he did against Georgia in that semifinal a couple of years ago, I was sold then. I'm all in essentially with this Houston team, but this is a really intriguing matchup on the road against a Minnesota team that is playing well on both sides of the ball. They're at home, and Houston, to be quite honest, has not looked all that great. Like, they struggled to move the ball at times. If it wasn't for Nico Collins making a couple acrobatic plays down the field, they really struggled to move the football against Chicago. And in week 1, it was back and forth, and their defense looked like it was a little leaky at times. So I think a lot of the public money is going to come in on Houston, knowing the line's under a field goal. But I'd be willing to bet the Sharps are all over Minnesota. So I'm going to take the points and take Minnesota.
I love that, dude, because I will say Minnesota's been the trap games for these teams so far. No one really picked them to beat 49ers, let alone week 1. But, man, Brian Flores has done amazing.
I picked him week 1.
Oh, okay. Well, Brian Flores has done amazing things with this defense. And they look ready to go. And Houston, what we're not talking about is Mixon's injury. We still have to wait on the reports and stuff, but Mixon could be banged up, and then we're looking at Cam Akers and Dario Ogunbowale.
Dameon Pierce.
Cam Akers
right?
And Dameon Pierce, yeah. And so this is a really interesting game. You're right. I think I agree with you, man. I think I got to take the upset and take Minnesota. Minnesota here, Now, this could look like a silly pick, if Sam Darnold comes back to earth a little bit, but I am worried about Mixon's injury a little bit.
I'm gonna be the contrarian here. I'm gonna take Houston. It is on the road. They're still in a dome. We haven't seen Minnesota have to really win a shootout yet. I know it was 23-17 against the Niners, but the Niners kind of scored late to cut it to just one possession. But I think if Houston can continue to put up points, and I know they were playing the Bears, whose offensive line looks awful, but their defense looked pretty good. Maybe looked a little leaky week 1, but week 2, their defense looked pretty fierce. I think they got pressure on 75% of snaps. Again, some of that's Chicago. But I want to see Darnold have to produce when his team is down and they have to pass. And the game script isn't. I want to see how he reacts in this situation. So I'm going to take Houston, who, like you, Kendall, I was on them preseason as a deep playoff team. Minnesota, I think, has overperformed, and they're also coming off such a high win in San Francisco. I think it could be easy to have a letdown game against Houston, who had a tune-up against the Bears and probably is coming in raring to go. So I'm going to go Houston there. Let's move over to go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we were just talking about a battle of two 2-0 teams, and there's another one on the slate, but it's one that not many people thought would be a battle of two 2-0 teams, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers going to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers and Justin Fields. What do you make? The over-under hilariously is at 36.5. So do not expect a lot of points in this game. There are going to be a lot of field goals and a lot of punts.
Part of this too hinges on the injury report we haven't got yet. Is Justin Herbert going to play? He did finish the game and then walked off limping. They said he's questionable right now. We're waiting to hear test results. If Justin Herbert doesn't play, I don't even know who's the backup quarterback for the Chargers. The Steelers are a team we talked about at the beginning of the year. Their over-under is at 8.5 because they always seem to get to 9 wins. And looking at the back half of their schedule, it's like, I don't see how they're going to get to 9 wins. Well, now that they're starting 2-0, it's like if they can get a lot of them at the beginning of the year, it's looking like they're going to end up at 9-8 once again. But with all that being said, I'm going to take the Steelers here. The way their defense is playing, they've announced Justin Fields is going to start again. I know Harbaugh has changed that culture in Los Angeles. It's the Chargers' first 2-0 start since 2012. It's been 12 years since they won the first 2 games of a season. That's not usually their thing. I just feel like the Steelers win these gritty, low-scoring games, especially the Steelers are at home, I believe.
Yes.
So I'm going to take the Steelers at home minus the 1.5.
Yeah, I mean, look, Harbaugh made me a fool in week 1 for picking against the Chargers, but I'm going to be doing it again because the best unit in this game is Pittsburgh's defense, so I'm going to count on that. I do think the Chargers every game, I think you're going to see Harbaugh's coaching and effectiveness come through. I think they're going to be competing as well as can be expected in each one of these games. It's going to be an ugly slugfest defense. I still take Steelers in the points.
And I think that's probably the smart play. So maybe I'm letting my love for Harbaugh and my gut affect me a little too much. But playing on the road, I mean, the Chargers essentially play 17 road games a year as it is anyway, right? They have more road fans than home fans at all of their home games. So that's negated somewhat. Now, granted, going to Pittsburgh is never an easy place to play. And so, like I said, there's a lot of reasons to like Pittsburgh. I agree with you, Rob, that their defense is probably the best unit in this game. But if the defenses are at least comparable and the offensive skill positions are somewhat comparable, and you're telling me it's Justin Herbert on one side and Justin Fields on the other, I'm going to take the guy who's an elite quarterback over a guy who I consider to be flat trash 10 times out of 10. And knowing normally for years, the Chargers, you had to, if you picked them to win a game or cover a spread, you did so knowing, well, you're at a coaching disadvantage. And Mike Tomlin's a great coach. And yet I still think it's an advantage for Los Angeles when you have Jim Harbaugh on that sideline. And I loved what he came out and said already on Monday earlier this week. We're viewing this as a playoff game. Like, they know they're facing a real test, and this is going to test their manhood. This is going to be a slobber knocker. It's going to be one in the trenches, and I believe in that Chargers offensive line, and I think they're going to run the ball far better than Pittsburgh, which will allow for Justin Herbert, the elite quarterback, to actually find some throws downfield on play action, whereas Justin Fields, if he's not able to, if Pittsburgh can't run the ball, I think we're looking at a game where he throws 2-3 picks. So I'm actually going to go upset special. Give me the Chargers on the road.
I will say I am in that pick there. I'm baking in a bit this Herbert injury of if Herbert doesn't play, I'm definitely taking the Steelers. If it comes out that Herbert's playing.
Everything I've read and heard thus far, I'm not too concerned about him playing. I think he will be fine.
All right. Well, let's move on here. We've got a couple teams that had a disappointing week this week. You've got Baltimore at Dallas. Baltimore favored by 1.5. Which of these teams breaks out of the funk?
Man, this game is so important for both teams, but especially for Baltimore. You can't really fall to 0-3. Now I guess with how poor that division has been, and like you talked about, like Pittsburgh, we expect when you see their final 8 games, the Steelers, they're not going to win 10, 11 games this year. Let's face it, right? They're not winning 10, 11. So I guess technically their season isn't over if they fall to 0-3, but what is it? 6% of teams that start 0-3 make the postseason, something like that. Like,
and at that point, you're looking at your
win. And Dallas has a little bit more leeway knowing their division. So the desperation is there a little bit more for Baltimore on the road. I still think they're a more physical team. They have essentially let games slip away, or they've been right there in Kansas City. Whereas Dallas, they look like world beaters week 1, and then they got absolutely housed at home. This is really difficult, but I'm going to take what I think is the more well-coached, more physical football team, and that's the Baltimore Ravens on the road.
I agree, and I have Baltimore being one of my season-long disappointments, and so far they are fulfilling on that. The O-line issues, the defense taking a step back, and then, to be honest, I think I did happen to call Lamar Jackson the James Harden of the NFL. So I do think, and I think it's fitting. I don't think he's shown the capability of stepping up when it matters most. That being said, although I am ragging on him a bit, I agree with you. These are both teams that need this win badly, and I do end up having Baltimore just out of sheer desperation for not being 0-3, like you pointed out. I mean, that's a crazy start for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. I think they're a more steady team. Dallas can shoot it out with the best of them, but I mean, you just saw what happened against New Orleans. I still have questions about Dallas's defense, despite me having Baltimore's defense taking a step back. Even if they take a step back from what I think is a historic defensive performance they had last year, I think that they're still a very good defense. And so I agree with you. I'm taking Baltimore in the points here, but this is a tricky game to pick because it could go wildly in each direction.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the contrarian again. I'm gonna take Dallas at home. I know they just got smoked last week and embarrassed on their own field, but generally Dallas has been great at home. I know you did talk about Lamar not stepping up, but when the pressure's on, the Cowboys also have not historically been great at that either. So it's hard. It's a coin toss. I am going to take Dallas at home, and they're getting a 1.5. So I'll take the home dog from two teams that I'm putting at kind of equal levels here. But the Ravens, one thing to look forward to, next week they play the Bills on Monday night. So if they start 0-3, you're going to face the team that looks like the best team in the AFC with a real chance of going 0-4, and then your season's almost a wash. So maybe I'm undermining my point here of taking Dallas. I do think the Ravens are desperate, but I think that Dallas is going to be so desperate to get over that embarrassment last week that they're going to come out with a plan and be able to take it to the Ravens.
Let's do one more shout out to the
game. They cut to Jerry Jones in the tunnel, and it's like, are we really still doing this? We're still asking Jerry Jones his thoughts after they got dropped. Like, what are we doing here? And I just, it's hard for me to ever really get behind them until that guy goes away.
Let's take a look at one more game this week for betting wise. You've got Detroit at Arizona. Detroit is favored by 3, I believe. It's a higher over-under game. I think it's projecting that these teams are going to shoot it out. Who do you got here? Both of these teams look like they could score. Does that continue? Does one strike you as better than the other? Where are you going?
This is another game where I feel like there's going to be a massive split between the public and the sharps. I think the public, they perceive the Lions as this juggernaut, and they were a few minutes away from reaching the Super Bowl last year. They have Super Bowl aspirations this year. Arizona, they're just playing over their skis. They're not really that good. So I think a lot of the public money is going to funnel in early in the week on Detroit in this game. But I actually like Arizona. I don't know if they win outright, but give me the points. I wouldn't be surprised if this line actually moves to 3.5 and maybe 4 as the week progresses. But that offense is legit. And we saw Tampa take advantage of this Detroit defense that everyone, they talk about that defensive line and their ability to get to the quarterback. Well, that secondary appears to be just as leaky as it was last year. And Kyler Murray, if you're getting some pressure, well, he can move. He can extend plays. Ask the Rams. The Rams had basically owned Arizona. McVay had owned Arizona. And Arizona was up, 30 at half or something like that? I think this offense in Arizona is legit. I touched on it earlier. James Conner, one of the most underappreciated, underrated running backs in the league. They have a legit star outside. They have a legit elite tight end. They're going to score plenty of points in this game. And even though I still do like Detroit season long, in this particular game, I like Arizona. Give me the points. I don't know if they cover, I don't know if they win outright, but I'm definitely taking the 3 points.
I'm going to take Arizona to win outright here, especially still pending more news on whether Amon-Ra is going to play this week, or if he does play, is his quad still going to be hurting him? That, I think, does limit the Lions, although Jameson Williams has now started to look like the Jameson Williams they drafted in the first round for the first time. That, like you said, I'm with you on the Lions season long. They didn't look great against the Bucs. I don't think they even really deserve to be as close in that game as they were. I thought the Bucs looked like the better team most of the game, and their defense came up big. Even as
they nearly lost to the Rams.
As Rob will lecture on and on too, the Bucs had significant injuries this week on defense and still came in and were able to stop the Lions. I think Arizona being at home where they looked like a track meet team, I mean, really they're one, if Kyler Murray had seen Marvin Harrison wide open in the end zone in week 1 at the end of the game, they're 2-0 right now. And I think as those guys like Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride get more experience together, this offense is going to get better and better. I'm taking them to beat the Lions outright here.
So I'm actually going to take this in a little bit different direction. Arizona's offense looks great. I do think the Rams, despite their history, the Rams' offense is in shambles. The O-line is terrible, and they lost the wide receiver core, things like that. Here's the thing. I think this is a get-right game for Detroit. I'm going to take them and the points, but I actually think that we're not doing over-unders, but I actually think this game hits the under. I think it's going to be more of a lower-scoring slugfest than people think with these offenses. Here's the thing. Amon-Ra is dealing with a little bit of this injury, and that does affect things a lot moving forward through the week, but they had Jared Goff last week throw 55 times, and it wasn't that the running game wasn't working. It felt to me, knowing this history between these teams going back to the last 2 years, it felt like a little bit of hubris by Ben Johnson. It felt like he wanted to exert his passing scheme will over Todd Bowles to show that he could win again. Because some of these decisions of not running the ball with David Montgomery when week 1 showed that their best identity is a power run team and to dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides. Because I think their D-line is going to surprise people this year too. I think it's a get-right game. I think that they're going to go back to the duo of David Montgomery and Gibbs, and I think their offensive line can definitely dominate Arizona's defensive line, and I don't think it's going to be a high-flying, super high-passing offense this week. I think it's going to go back to their basics, ground and pound, and I think they're going to get a little bit of a lead, and then at the third and fourth quarter go heavier on David Montgomery and maybe win by 4 points. So I'm going to take Detroit in the points here in a get-back game.
I love it. Well, let's go. The rest of these games, we're going to go rapid fire. We're not going to go in depth or over the lines. But just for on the record, I'm going to give you a game. You guys give me a winner here. Let's start Thursday night, Patriots-Jets, AFC East battle. Who you got?
Jets.
I've got the Jets, but the Patriots are a well-coached team.
I'm taking the Patriots. They own the Jets, even if they have to beat them 3-0.
That streak last year, they finally beat us.
And I think this year the Patriots started up again. The Patriots have been overplaying on defense. Aaron Rodgers looks a bit washed to me. I'm going Pats. Let's go Dolphins-Seahawks in Seattle.
Seattle.
Oh, Seahawks, for sure.
Unfortunately, I'm right with you guys. Skylar Thompson's not going to be the guy. Giants-Browns in Cleveland.
Browns. It's a gimme.
The Browns. Yeah, I'm going to say the Browns. Giants are still not a complete team.
I'll agree. I'll take the Browns there. How about Packers-Titans in Tennessee?
That's actually
I like Tennessee with the I don't know if they're set to win or not, but I like Tennessee with what feels like an upset.
I'm going to take the Packers just because I trust that locker room. I trust that coaching staff more. Tennessee, after Will Levis, the head coach, basically was like, dude, you fucking suck. Get off my team. Like, it's hard for me to get behind them.
Yeah, I'm going to go Packers as well there. How about Bears-Colts in Indy? Bears 1-1, Colts 0-2.
I'll take the Colts.
I'm taking the Colts. The Colts have a porous run defense, but the Bears don't have a run offense. So I'm taking matchup weaknesses and strengths. I'm taking the Colts.
I'm going to take the Colts as well. We talked about Texans-Vikings. We talked about the Eagles-Saints. We talked about Chargers-Steelers. How about Broncos-Buccaneers? Rob, I assume you're taking the Broncos.
Not on your life, baby. This is a trap game, but this we have injuries. We're going to let them rest another week in a game that we win.
Yeah, the
Bucs. I'm with you. I'll take the Bucs here.
Yeah, I'll take the Bucs, but it won't be easy. That Denver defense is legit.
How about Panthers-Raiders in Las Vegas?
You know, I might take the Panthers in an upset. I think the Raiders are going to be riding high. They're going to be in Sin City all week, living it up. And I think the Red Rifle coming in for the benched Bryce Young. Yeah, give me the Panthers in the upset.
Oh, I'm going to disagree with that. Hold on. You've got the Raiders are in Sin City every week. It's the Panthers that are in Sin City.
But they don't win a game every week.
The Panthers don't win a game any week. The Panthers have scored 13 total points this season in 2 games.
I'm going to say that the Red Rifle is going to inject some energy and enthusiasm into that offense.
Oof, I'm taking the Raiders here. How about you, Rob?
I agree in concept, and I love the upset pick that Kendall did. I love that pick. I'm still taking the Raiders. Well-coached team, gritty team. And although, moving forward, some fantasy options for the Panthers should be on the rise a little bit with Andy Dalton, I still don't think they're going to beat the Raiders this week.
How about a big NFC West battle, the Niners and Rams?
Easy, Niners.
Niners for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to go Niners here as well. I was weighing it in my head. I really want to take the Rams
with that
here.
Offensive line, you can't.
Well, and without Cooper Kupp, without Puka Nacua, their defense is a step down from last year. And the Niners coming off kind of an embarrassing loss to Minnesota when they thought they could bring it. I think the Niners come to play. And then I think last but not least, we've got Chiefs-Falcons. Chiefs on the road against the Falcons. Does their luck continue, or are the Falcons actually a team that can compete this year?
They can compete, but I'll take the Chiefs.
Yeah, Falcons will look better than they looked 90% of the game last week. I'm taking the Chiefs. I'm taking the Chiefs here despite the injuries. I just think, like Kendall was alluding to, situationally they're more sound.
Yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs because even if it's close, they've got the refs. Flip a coin, but I'll take the Chiefs there. All right, so that's all of our picks. Let's kick it to Kendall for this week's Kendall's Corner for your betting tips and picks.
So, as I've talked about in the past and over the last couple seasons, in Kendall's Corner, parlay bets in general, you should never make them when you're including point spreads. It's how Vegas was built. But I noticed a trend years ago in ways that you can actually use the spreads, use parlays to your advantage against Vegas. How many times as a football fan are you sitting at home and you're like, shit, I don't know. Are the Niners going to beat this crappy team by 13 and you're trying to figure it out, right? And it's really difficult. Well, you don't know if they're going to cover that 13-point spread, but 97 times out of 100 they're going to win that game, right? Well, every week in the NFL, there's usually 2 or 3 games where the team is going to win. You put those three together, you parlay money lines. I've hit 68% of these the last 2 seasons, and we're back at it again this year. So week 3, money line parlay of the week. You take the Browns at home against the lowly Giants. Don't forget, a lot of people jumped off the Browns bandwagon after they got housed against Dallas week 1. Their defense is who we thought they were. They're going to dominate this week against the Giants. So even without an offense, the Browns are going to win that game. San Francisco owns the Rams. So even if it wasn't for all the injuries that Drew alluded to a couple moments ago, you'd be taking the Niners. But knowing that Los Angeles is decimated and San Fran was embarrassed, San Fran's going to win that game. And finally, Cincinnati, they start 0-2 every year. Then they start getting it together. Guess what? They're at home on Monday night against Washington. You obviously like the Bengals. You put those 3 together, you get plus 110. You're getting better than even money for those 3 teams to win. I would much rather place that bet than lay minus 110 on any one of those when you're guessing on a point spread. So that's the money line parlay of the week. And now it's time to tease. If you like playing teasers, they're a little bit trickier, but you can get much better odds. If I tease down, as I talked about that Cleveland line, it's at 7.5. It's at 6.5 right now. Tease that down to a half a point. Tease the Chargers up from plus 1.5 to plus 7.5. Tease the Niners down to minus 1.5, and the Bengals to minus 2.5. As I talked about, Cleveland's going to beat the Giants, and by teasing them, you just need them to win. San Fran's going to beat the Rams. You just need them to win by 2. Feel pretty confident that's going to happen. Cincinnati, will they cover that 8.5 point spread? I don't know. I feel confident they're going to win by more than 2.5. And the Chargers to get 7.5 in that defensive game. I love to tease those 4 particularly. You'll get plus 240. Bet 100 to win 340. I like those bets. That's Kendall's Corner for the week. And for Rob and Drew, this is week 3. Let's make some money. Let's improve in fantasy, put ourselves in position to win, and we will see you guys next week.